Today I have something special for you all. I had the opportunity to interview the creative director of the upcoming Milsim game, Bellum. His name is Ryan Yuan, also known as KARMAKUT. Karma's been one of the leading creators in the Milsim genre on YouTube over the last 10 years, and he's now channeling his unparalleled experience in Milsim gaming towards making the game of his dreams. So here's the conversation that resulted from my questions. I opted to leave it as unedited as possible so that you guys can hear everything straight from the man himself. The interview was lengthy, so I did divide it into 2 parts. I will upload part 2 as soon as I can prepare it. There are chapters so you can see what topics were covered. That said, I highly encourage you to watch the whole thing because the conversation provided unparalleled insight on what to expect from Bellum and what goes on in the mind of Bellum's creative director. So I hope you all enjoy. All right, let's start with the gunplay, because I think it's fair to say that Bellum, being a first-person shooter, it's gonna have like its gunplay, its movement, the firefight mechanics, kind of at the front and center of the experience. And Bellum being a game, or you having the vision of putting realism at the center of the game, there's like a challenge, I feel like, in translating weapon handling and marksmanship to using, a mouse on a 2-dimensional screen. And, different games in the FPS space have different approaches. You've got like CSGO on one end, that's like point and click. And then I guess Squad ICO on the other, where it's, you're fighting your gun as much as you're fighting the enemy. And kind of what has your thinking been in the approach with Bellum's gunplay? And maybe where on that spectrum I just put down would you place Bellum? Or would you want it to be?
Gotcha. So a lot of these questions I'll answer, depending on how you look at it, is going to be either an annoying way to look at it, or an annoying answer, or it's going to be an answer that like is super insightful. Because like the way we go about a lot of the design is not like, oh, we want it specifically to be like this. It's like a mentality or a philosophy behind a lot of decisions. And from there, we tweak and we change to get it to match that. So like what I say right now might change in the future if we discover something new. But in general, that's how I answer questions, just so that
I'm all about the philosophy, dude. Yeah, that's what I'm here for, man.
Sure. So specifically regarding gunplay, there's a certain amount of things that we like, that we dislike, and so let's just get into it. So the number one thing is like we want shooting to be immersive, right? And that is an interesting thing to do because I think the majority of gamers have never shot a gun. I think that is just the nature of things. First off, it's like mostly Americans or service members in other nations that have shot weapons. Weapons outside of America aren't necessarily that ubiquitous or easy to like get your hands on and just go out and shoot a variety of different calibers, a variety of different weapons, and also have that experience of untrained shooting and trained shooting, right? Because the difference between the two is vast. And even, there's different styles of shooting, and there's a whole bunch of different philosophies when it comes to that. So shooting is almost the same thing, where there's a different experience that everyone's going to have in regards to what people are experienced with, how they shoot, how accurate they are, and what it feels like for them and how they handle the recoil. But there's a couple of impulses or key things that we want to take away that really, in our experiences, from our experience talking to shooters, really encapsulates the challenge of shooting. And some of it doesn't even have to do with the firing of the rifle itself. So the first thing is, a lot of these games have you either have very simplified shooting, like you mentioned, like CSGO, or you have really complex shooting like Squad. The challenge comes in to where do we get it to feel like we have that shot impulse that's probably the epitome of the design is when you shoot, you have a response, and then you're correcting for that response. So shoot, reset, shoot, reset, shoot, reset. That's where a lot of the gunplay has gone into. It's not fighting this way. It's not like dealing with holding your breath, right? Those aren't like the top of the priorities when it comes to how we're doing gunplay. For our gunplay, it's shoot, reset, shoot, reset, shoot, reset. So every time you shot, that recoil impulse, that act in real life shooting of where you pull the trigger and then the gun moves and then you have to move it back on target, that is like where we're making the challenge in shooting, not necessarily fighting this way or looking down your optic, just because those things I don't feel like are the essence of shooting. The majority of the time, it's resetting your sights. The way we handle the easiness of shooting is a little bit different too, just because you can't make shooting 1-to-1 in a video game with a mouse and keyboard as much as you ever want to try. And there's some, fundamental reasons for that. One being the way that you hold a rifle, you are not holding your keyboard and mouse the same way. There's no gravity helping you reset the weapon. So gravity is actually one where that's why you get the when you shoot a gun in some games, why the recoil moves off and then never comes back down. Because in real life, when you pull the trigger and that weapon goes up and then it comes back down, some of that is partially due to gravity when you're holding the weapon. But with a mouse and keyboard, right, your hands are in a different position. They're rested on the table, and so you don't have that natural recoil reset. So that's why that's probably one of the reasons why people get so when real shooters come into video games and they shoot guns and they're like, whoa, this gun's going everywhere. It's going like off the screen. Well, yeah, because we're not resetting the sight picture for you with gravity, because gravity does not exist in the position that you're sitting currently. That kind of ties into another philosophy where whatever you're feeling with the keyboard, whatever you're doing with the mouse, we want it to make sense to you, right? I think one of the most important, or I think immersion breaking things is when your character does something that you are not expecting or not intending, right? Or when you don't feel like you have control over your player. And so that's like one of the pain points I have with a lot of other games and experiences is that when I'm playing, if my character's doing something that I did not intend or does not make sense to me, or like I'm mentally not in that space of like this should be happening, then it sucks me right out. So there's another game recently that came out with a recoil and shooting mechanic change where experienced shooters or people who know how guns work, when they play it, it doesn't make sense. Like there's things in there that straight up do not make sense. It rips you out of the immersion, and no matter what the gameplay effect was, like there's a first effect right there that just completely rips you out of the immersion of what's happening, regardless of even the screen blur and whatnot. So we want it to be clean, we want it to be snappy as far as the gunplay goes, and we can handle the difficulty in the shooting and in the killing of enemy players. In other places like finding the enemy player, identifying the enemy player, fighting through actual challenges like wind and body armor. We can increase the difficulty at a higher level, but keep the shooting crisp, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. That was an amazing answer. Thank you.
Sorry, that was a long one.
No, I mean honestly, like as long as this is the gear we're on, I think we're gonna be having a good time. All right, so nice. That's gunplay. Now, when it comes to the different factions that you have, there are 3 confirmed factions. You've got the 75th Ranger Regiment, the Russian Satyr PMCs, and the local insurgents. I forgot their name. What were they called?
The Al-Zalam.
Al-Zalam. Okay. So these 3 factions, you've been consistent in saying that you want each of them to be unique and their weapons to be distinct with their different playstyles, and you want to emphasize depth rather than breadth of content. So can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by depth, both in terms of how the factions play, but maybe also in specific weapons?
Sure. Yeah, and I do go on pretty long with these questions. So at any point in time you need to interject or anything, just butt in. Don't feel bad about it.
I'm adopting the Sean Ryan philosophy where I ask a question and we can sit here for 6 hours if we need to, and just let you go for it, man.
Sounds good. Okay.
Seriously, like for me, this is like a cool opportunity to talk to you and get some cool content. But I also think it's for you, it's like a really great opportunity for you to just let it all out. All those thoughts that have been, in the back of your mind, that have been simmering, that have been driving the design of Bellum. I'd love for you to get an opportunity to just get it all out there.
For sure. Awesome. Okay. Well, the depth of the experience from factions. So one of the things, once again, going back to a game design philosophy answer-ish, one of the things that I personally dislike when I play a lot of these tactical shooters nowadays, or just a lot of shooters and games in general, is that factions end up becoming just copy-paste, different skinned versions of themselves. So what I mean by that is when a certain game adds a new faction, it's like, okay, like, yes, you have a different gun, you have a couple of different looking attachments, maybe, you have different clothes, you have different vehicles, which is probably the most impactful difference from faction to factions in a lot of games now is the vehicle changes. But the problem with in my experience is it just gets to a point where you kind of stop caring. You kind of stop caring about new factions coming out because they all feel the same. They do the same thing. They play the same way. They don't have interesting mechanics outside of like the assets that they're allowed to use that makes them feel unique. And I think that's a missed opportunity. Just because from my experience, like learning more about like the Rangers or learning more about Wagner and the Russian PFC, like there's so much depth that you can get into as far as how these people operate, how they play, what they do to the kit, their organizational structure, the assets that they use, of course, as mentioned. But for example, like every time we add a faction, and this is a unique opportunity because we're also planning on doing some limited form of customization. You can really make a faction feel unique based off of the flexibility or the customization and attachments they're allowed to use and swap between and whatnot. And this comes, I think, from unironically probably games like deck building games or
Okay.
Broken Arrow just released. It's kind of like that mentality, where every faction has a special thing that they can do and they can do it well and it's balanced in its own way. And one of the benefits to, people might say, oh, that's an absolute nightmare, right? Balancing asymmetrically across different unique factions is an absolute nightmare. But the benefit to our project is that it is limited in scope, right? So we're not doing like all the jets, and we're not doing like we don't have to worry about seed. We have to worry about all the different things that Broken Arrow has that you have to balance. That game, it must be incredible to balance, and that's probably a testament to the fact that you can balance things to a degree asymmetrically. Things might be frustrating and you might have to fine tune things along the way, but it's possible. But as far as aside from the assets of the experience of each faction, like one of the things is the insurgents or the counterinsurgents and the guerrillas have to fight differently. Like you cannot expect like a rebel force to go head to head. Squad Calm, Fire Team Wedge straight into a conventional force, right? They're under equipped. They are not. They don't have the same training. It's a completely different experience when you're fighting with these different groups. And one of the things we want to do with those guerrilla forces is give them that guerrilla feel, right? I think that's something that I think like a lot about Insurgency Sandstorm or like some other games as well, where like the insurgents don't really fight like insurgents, right? They fight like the conventional forces, just with worse weapons, and it's just a feels bad. It's just a feels bad because it's like, what am I supposed to do? Like, this guy's got body armor and like an optic, and I'm running around out here in my thin-skinned like pickup truck, like getting shredded by these Bradleys and whatnot. And it's a feels bad. So that's actually a core pillar of how Occupation as a game mode came to be around. It's like we wanted a game mode that could create these different experiences depending on the faction that you played, because that depth actually creates more actually adds a more wider experience, right? Which is kind of counterintuitive when you think about it.
No,
but
that
if
makes
you go
total
really
sense.
deep, if you go really deep into the factions, they're able to do more unique things, which expands the experience rather than just expanding the experience a shallow way of going, I have 50 different factions that all have their unique assets, but all play the same. So it's roughly the same experience with different skins, versus I have 3 factions that have different ways of playing, different ways that that their lives are valued, different buildings that they can create that have different benefits or influence gain. They start on the map differently. So now you have, with only 3 factions, you have infinitely, I'd argue, more gameplay possibility and width of experience than you would than having a cookie cutter game mode with different flavored factions fighting each other on the same map. Because I think in Milsim or tactical platoon shooters, that's where the meat of the game is. It's in the execution of what is happening on the map. It is not necessarily like Call of Duty where it's, new weapon skin, look at this, Nicki Minaj skin, or it's like, it's not like we're not getting the thrills from, oh, visually that is insane. We're getting the thrills in these games from, oh crap, like we can actually fight as a guerrilla force here, or we can fight as a conventional force here. We can convoy vehicles, we can sneak behind the back line. That's where the meat of the experience is. It's not in the, here's 50 different factions that all play the same, and we're just gonna meat grind it out over the center cap over and over and over again. Yeah, so that's the thought process there. As far as specifically the gameplay differences between them, so right now it's, and this goes back to like kind of my StarCraft 2 days. I played a lot of StarCraft 2.
I was gonna mention StarCraft 2. I'll wait till you're done.
Sure. So like you have the Zerg, which are the insurgent slash guerrilla force in our experience, right? Their value is mass. It's in flanking. It's in speed. It's in really surgical kind of harassment. And then you have like the middle tier, which is like the Terrans, right? Who are adaptable and who have a whole bunch of different abilities, and they can swap. They can transform her into different type of units, and they have like a lot of flexibility. And that's more or less the Russian PMC group in our game. Like they're going to be able to adapt more freely, just because their organization is much more unorthodox or freeform than a conventional army. And then you have like the Protoss, which is like the best of the best, right? The most expensive stuff. It's slow, it's powerful, it's good. Like that's the Rangers out the gate. So that's pretty much why we started with the three factions, and that's kind of how out the gate we're going to be balancing them, and how they should all feel in their own way. And so they'll play differently, and that's important to us, instead of just looking differently.
Yeah, so the way you're drawing from RTS games is really cool. And the moment you started talking about it, my mind immediately went to StarCraft 2, because I too had a pretty prolific StarCraft 2 phase, and personally a Terran player. And like you have three factions that are so different. Like it is, practically speaking, almost infinite replayability unless you absolutely no life the game for years. So that whole depth leading to width makes complete sense, and it's very cool that you kind of mapped it out to the Bellum factions just there.
Yeah, it's it's just taking all these experiences that I've had from all these different games, and just seeing like what was the best one, and then also just like what was my favorite implementation of certain things, or what were my favorite things that a game did, and then also just adding it and combining it with like my love for the military experience, for the platoon infantry experience, of working with different squads, and that leadership and then camaraderie, and the talking between different squads to execute a goal at a scale that is not common in the FPS space. It's just a couple platoon shooters that are out there, but it's a super unique experience. I think once you figure it out and you see it, it's very hard to go back to other experiences. And when you play it at the highest level, like that's one of my feelings, right? It's like when I play COG, it's when we play kill COG events, or even the COG PvE events, it's like more people should experience this, and it's a shame that games are not set up in a way that people can easily experience this, right? Like it is a monster of a collaboration and production to put on those operations, especially the PvP ones. Just because we have to set up the servers, we have to do all the mod work, we have to do all the admin work, we have to do like getting the public player base ready, we have to train the whole unit up, blah blah blah. But like when you get it, when you play it, it's like, holy crap, like this, I wish this was in a bite-sized accessible experience that more people could enjoy, because there is something special there, I think.
Yeah, there's truly nothing like it. All right, so next let's dive into the realism aspect of things a bit, specifically suppression, because suppression, classically, it's a super important component of infantry combat. But we've kind of seen in the tactical shooter space, it can be tough, and it's very subjective, right? It can be tough to make it present in a way that's like trying to drive that authenticity a bit, but also fun and feel natural. So I'm curious what you think about kind of balancing the need to simulate more realistic firefight dynamics like suppression, but also keeping things fun.
Sure. So this one's going to be a bearer of an answer. So
okay.
Suppression, the way I think about suppression is that it is related to how much a player values, or there's two ways you can do it. Technically, there's two ways. You can either do it the way where you are suppressed because you value your life IRL, right? Like,
Hmm.
or authentically in a game, maybe it's DayZ or even Tarkov, right? Sometimes in
Yeah.
Tarkov, you can kind of feel a small essence of that. Granted, it doesn't work in Tarkov because you are generally playing Tarkov solo unless you are able to get a stack together. And when you do that, then suppression works because you can maneuver, right? But if you're doing one-on-one
Hmm.
fights, like you can do a little suppression when you're pushing up on someone, but generally it requires two parts to execute like a suppression and a flanking maneuver. But suppression can be done authentically by giving you the feel that your life is valued, or it can be done through gameplay effects, going back to like Broken Arrow, or trying to think what other game does. I mean, I guess you could say Squad, right? Where it's like this heavy-handed or game value
Battlefield
effect
3.
where it changes certain aspects of your character's ability to do things. Whether it's like your accuracy gets lowered, or your screen gets messed up, or you literally can't shoot back because your gun's flopping all over the place. There's those two routes that we can look at suppression. I guess also on the Tarkov, another example that makes sense to me but doesn't make sense to a lot of people, just because they've never had that experience, is like one life events, whether it's in Squad from Squad Ops or if
Yeah.
it's from Arma. You can kind of get the feeling of that too, right? Like in Arma, we don't really have that crazy. I don't think it's like, unless you're super getting suppressed, your screen goes black and white. But outside of that, like there isn't really any suppression effect in COG operations or even in the Squad Ops, pre-ICO Squad Ops events. It was pretty raw standard gameplay as far as the suppression visual and gameplay effects. But the thing was that you valued your life, and that aligns and is authentic and parallels what would happen in real life, where when you get shot at, your vision doesn't blur, right? You don't end up not being able to see anything. Maybe like you get tunnel vision, but you don't like have a literal black a black cone that you notice. You you are just valuing your life, right? You just do not want to die, and that is the strongest. That is the strongest of the strongest of the strongest influences that you can push, I think, onto a player base in order for them to authentically feel suppression. Because if you go the other route, right, it works in games like Broken Arrow or any non-FPS game because you are not experiencing that actual debuff onto your unit, your character. But I think when you do it in certain first-person shooters, you have to do it very, very, very carefully. There's only a couple ways I think that you can actually have heavy-handed gameplay effects via suppression effect and be authentic and believable to the player experience. And the main reason for that is, if I'm sitting here and I'm experiencing the suppression, but I do not buy the fact that I'm suppressed, I do not feel like my life is in danger. I do not feel like I should be suppressed or I should be responding. My character should be responding in this way that he's responding right now. It's a complete disconnect. It's a complete and instant disconnect, right? And that's what a
Yeah.
lot of people feel when it comes to some of these games. Like, I just throw my hands. Like, I guess like that's what my character is doing. Versus an experience in Tarkov where it's like, oh shit, my heart's pumping. I don't want to die. I'm looking for how I get out of this situation right now. I'm looking for cover, right? Like that is more so the experience that we want to we want to create. And so the question becomes now, well, how do you create an experience like that? How do you make people value their lives, right? And that is a super complex question, but like some things, just from my experience, that I think we can kind of point to and kind of look at as a guiding star or a way to get there, is that number one, limited lives is first and foremost the most impactful thing you could ever do to create an experience where players do not want to die, right? Even so far as like Call of Duty Search and Destroy, where you have one life, like players in there, they play slower, right? They just do because they don't want to die. Like that is like the core of the experience is limit the lives. If you're able to limit the lives, you will probably make a more authentic game no matter what it is when it comes to infantry gameplay or like any kind of like realism gameplay. You'll probably make that experience better 100%, right? That opens up more problems that you have to go through and then adjust and fix and whatnot. Whereas like making sure that people don't die to stupid stuff, right? How do you deal with team kills? How do you deal with how do you deal with when players die? What does that do to the rest of the game mode? Are they sitting there in camera for 40 minutes? Well, like, what do you do with that whole experience? So what I can say is, when it comes to suppression, what we're going to be doing is 100% making you feel like your life is valuable, and not so much in the sense that, oh, my life has a ticket. There's some arbitrary like count to the. No one cares about that. I'm gonna be completely real with all these games with the ticket thing. No one cares how many times you die until you get to the last 20 tickets.
Yep.
Like the group punishment thing, it does not work. The group pool that everyone pulls from, no one cares. No one's keeping track until the end of the game when you look at the scoreboard and you're like, what? How are you dying 15 times? And that's the only
It's
time
just
anyone
cope.
cares.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that dude that died 15 times, he doesn't even really care either. Like, it's just that he might be like, oh my God, I'm getting destroyed this game. But it's not teaching him to play differently. It's not getting him to value suppression. The goal is it's just acting as a way to end the match at that point.
Yeah.
So we definitely want players to value their lives in ways that are not just tickets. This kind of ties into how we plan on doing progression to a degree, much like Tarkov, right? And Tarkov, where I mentioned Tarkov a lot, just because Tarkov did so many unique things
It really did.
to create that experience. Yeah, and so one of those is the ability or not the ability, but the fact that your life mattered because it affected your progression. It affected a lot outside of just you losing stuff in that immediate match. It affected how far you would get into the game, and I think there's something to be gleaned from that for an experience like this, because we're not doing a loot value based shooter, right? We're not doing an extraction shooter where like you're slowly building up your hoard in your bank and you have like, oh my God, I have all these guns and all this money. Like, that's not the experience. So the question for our game has been, how do we take that philosophy of player lives matter and living should be rewarded and death should be super punishing in ways that are not inside the exact experience, right? Inside the exact match. How do we affect the meta of the player's progression throughout the game itself into reinforcing that core philosophy? And so that's kind of how we've been approaching that simple question of what's the suppression in the game going to be like. It's tied to so many things. It's tied to progression. It's tied to how the life ticket system works. It's tied to it's even tied to response. We're testing a respawn system right now that we'll do a whole blog post and whatnot once it comes. It's not going to be. We're gonna be improving as many systems as possible in this game. We're not interested in repeating the same problems. We're not interested in having like that's one of the things that I personally hated as well. Is like a new tactical shooter comes out and it has the same problems, or if not worse problems than tactical shooters before, because it did not learn those problems or did not try to improve upon them. I remember talking about Gray Zone Warfare. They invited us out for a pre-testing session, and I remember raising some concerns. Like, some people knew upon instantly playing the game, like, the HLZ camping is going to be brutal.
Yep.
People are going to walk into other people's bases. Like, that's just a gamerism within the niche that you just know that's going to happen. And it was that was like a big pain point for me. It was like, I don't like seeing that happen in tactical shooters, because I've been doing this for 10 years. I don't like it when a game has created an experience that has problems that have been fixed in the past that have not been addressed because they just aren't aware, or whatever the case may be. So any system that we implement, it is going to attempt to be an improvement on previous systems. And so a respawn system is an example of that, in order to support the suppression and to support the squad cohesion that we think is failing or not as good as it should be elsewhere.
Interesting. That whole progression comment is very interesting. But I remember, back when I was playing squad a lot, I was in the clan, the 7th Ranger Regiment. We were the 7th, not the 75th. But we'd hold these like Milsim events every weekend, quote unquote Milsim. But the way the events were made was so that every player had limited respawns. You get like 3 respawns was the average. Sometimes they lower it to 2. Sometimes it'd be as high as 5, depending on what the scenario was. But I noticed that like having that limited respawn, just exact same game, but just that one rule changed the experience instantly. And it also helped to prevent really stupid stuff like console command /respawn to like, teleport yourself across the map to a more relevant position near the spawn if you have to like defend a base or something. So that aspect being the more important part of suppression is definitely something that's prominent to me as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
when it comes to crew served weapons, though, I feel like when you hear suppression, like the epitome of that are machine guns. But I noticed this in Squad. It happens in Armor Forger too. A lot of times you have these belt feds and they can't do the job that they're meant to. Do you think that is that something that you're thinking about when it comes to Bellum?
Yeah, and that almost goes back to like that first question of like depth of experience. Is that the if all your guns act the same and they all kind of do the same thing, then it just doesn't feel great to use different guns because they don't fulfill the role that they're supposed to, or they don't fill that niche. And so a lot of the design has been, well, how do we make that niche purpose of that weapon effective, right? Or how do we get the weapon to perform as it should in the situations it should and be used properly? So crew served weapons or just machine guns in general are one of those things in Milsim gaming that's like super tricky for a lot of games to handle, right? In a lot of games, in the vast majority of games, the machine gun is just a rifle with a larger mag. That is
Yeah,
just what it is. It is, and sometimes
and
I
worse
remember
handling.
personally, yeah, I remember personally in Squad just because of how the game is set up. Like I would use the MG as a sniper rifle, right, with 100 bullets, just because of how the shooting was in that game, just because of how that experience was. Like it allowed you to use those guns like that before, and you just single tap, single tap, single tap, and that stems from the fact that suppression is not important, right? Like all of this stuff is all tied together. Like it is all tied together. It's not like an individual thing you can tweak and then oh we
Mhm.
fix this one thing in isolation. In my experience, like modding and creating these events and experiences, everything is tied to everything else. The way you affect the progression system, the way it'll affect the so many other systems as well. The way you affect how your lives are treated will affect so many things as well. Because as you mentioned, right, um, if you simply if you simply drop the life level, right? Let's say every squad match was a one life event, you would probably see suppression. You would probably
Mhm.
see suppression used the way it's supposed to without changing anything else, just because people value their lives and they don't want to get wrecked by a stray shot. So it's it as I mentioned before, if you drop the life limit, it's going to fix like a vast majority of reasons. You'll start seeing weapons used how they're supposed to be used. You'll start seeing games slow down. You'll start seeing a lot of that stuff come into play, and that's why I love one life events. That's why I've always done one life squad events, always done one life arm events and things of that nature. Is because that is the most authentic way, an easy way, and just it feels great because it things work the way they should. There's some cheese you have to account for and counter and stop in general. Yeah, dropping that life limit down helps. But in regards to the weapons, I got off topic a little bit. In regards to the
You're good.
weapons and how they function IRL, there's a lot of cool things you can do, right? Like barrack rounds, like anti-structure munitions for uh, heavy anti-tank and launchers, right? Like that stuff has a unique use, and in a lot of games, just because of the technical challenge, like suppression is not present, right? So there's ways you can definitely make the round pass damage through walls. We've seen it before in Dave Infamy, or even I think in Squad, like ID damage passes through walls. Like there's always been this thing where if there's no destruction, then you get super weird gameplay. But like I feel like you can make rounds that are anti-structure munitions that they hit the outside wall, they pass the damage through the wall, or they just ignore wall damage, and you can get roughly the same effect. And that's how you could improve the experience of like RPGs or launchers and give them more depth. You can give them airburst rounds. You can give them flechette rounds. Like going back to depth, like you could take a Carl Gustav, give it every round in the book, and now you have this crazy depth and you have this crazy capability, which is mirrors its real life capability because those rounds are real, right?
Mhm.
From flechette to smoke to HE to anti-structure. You have thermobaric rounds for the Russians that they can use that has a unique capability. Like that's the thing. It's like just going deep gives you the capabilities, and making players' lives matter means that they have to use the correct tool at the correct time, in the correct manner, just to get the maximum value, so that they don't die and the enemy dies. And that is the core of infantry warfare, right? Is I'm killing you,
Mhm.
you're not killing me, and how do we use the tools, and what tools do we need to make in order to do that? But if you don't have that, if it doesn't matter that much, if things are not that, I guess, dire, or not that important or not that valued, then everything just boils down to the lowest common denominator. So that's it. That question, I guess, is handled elsewhere in the design.
Gotcha.
Aside from the fact that we're just adding things that these weapons should have, right? Like machine guns should have belt linking.
Yeah.
Yeah. They should have barrel changing. They should have tripod deployment. These are things that should be happening. These are capabilities that they should have. But the experience needs to be intimate enough for players to care about it, and they need to be locked in enough that they want to do it. Mm-hmm. If I can just spawn die with a rifle over and over again, just repeatedly into the enemy, and I can get value out of that, then they will do that. And that's the issue there.
Gotcha. All right. We were at like 10,000 feet. So for these next couple of questions, I'm going to bring it more down to like the published content roadmap that you have for Bellum.
Sure.
So you have launchers, construction, electronic warfare, command roles, and vehicles outlined in that roadmap. And personally, the middle three, construction, E-War, and command, interest me the most. And I'll get to launchers and vehicles in a second. But starting with construction, kind of what's the extent of what you guys want to make possible? Is it going to be like, there are limited areas where you can construct? Is it going to be free build? What are you guys thinking?
So it's going to be core gameplay pillars, authenticity as much as possible, right? So the building is going to be pretty much only restricted by how you get the materials there. That's pretty much the limiting factor at this point in time in the design. So what that means is like you can build it. There's not like a zone you have to build in. There's not like an area you're only allowed to build in, or you're not allowed to build here or there, aside from like in the main bases to like prevent people griefing you and locking you in the base. Mm-hmm. If you can move the material there by man, vehicle, or other means, then once the material's there, you're able to construct there. So it's going to be and that just opens up the experience, because now in addition to building defenses at your ob, right, or at your main base, or at the cop or whatever, you can actually start affecting the terrain around you on the map. And so that lends itself to replayability. It gives players the tools in order to like shape the battlefield truly to how they want. Like maybe this hill is a super good position. We're gonna make a defensive position here. It's not a base. It's not objective. This is just terrain that we think is valuable and insightful and gives us an advantage in this current situation. And that's a unique thing that we can do just because of how the game mode is set up, right? And it's also because, once again, the value is placed in the right areas of the experience. It's the life of the player, and players will do, when your life is near one of the only things that matter, you'll do what you need to improve that value. That's just how games work. That's just how human thinking works. So if we can put more value on the life, then I'm sitting at this position for a while. I want to stay at this position for a while. Yeah, let's get some construction up here because this is, I want to live and kill the enemy, and that improves my odds of doing this. And I don't have like a greater value. This is going to bring me on to another tangent. I can feel it coming already. This is going to bring me to this is going to improve my odds. And this is kind of like where my kind of thinking in these games, I think, whether it's regressed because or like loop back to the original point, or it has expanded. I'm not sure at this point, because I feel like Milsim has gone in so many different, or like realistic shooters have gone in so many different directions. But PTFO, playing the objective, is actually detrimental. Like that, not from a player experience, but from a gameplay design philosophy, I think is detrimental to the specific experience a lot of realistic shooters are trying to create.
Yeah.
And that is a hot one, I think, for a lot of people. I know PTFO, play the fucking objective, right? But the problem is that once you do that, once you create this overwhelming incentive for players to do something to gain points to win the match that is not, quote unquote, authentic to the real life, infantry warfighting experience, you get meat grindy, weird things happening. You get really weird behaviors happening, and metas forming because of that. Right? Whether you see people, as you mentioned earlier, give up and respawn over here because the fob is over here. We need to get in the cap, right? Play the objective, right? That's the only thing that matters. The other issue that you see with that in squad is that any gunfight outside of an objective does not matter at all. Give up, respawn, and go to the next objective, or go to the next closest spawn point. That kind of gameplay design is actually super detrimental to, going back to before, valuing your life, right? Because if you value the objective over your life, you get a lot of weird behaviors happening. And when you get that kind of mentality in a player, then they start doing things that they don't care if they die. And if they don't care if they die, a lot of this framework falls apart. Just because of how players will do anything to win the match, or the vast majority, I think, of players. So one of the objectives of the game mode is that your life is the number one objective, right? That is the number one objective. Gotcha. Is yes, complete the objectives or complete the tasks at hand, but do so in a way that is minimal loss to your force, right? Or minimal loss to your life pool, or whatever the case may be. And that is that caveat of like, do it without dying. That it is core to so many tactics, so many real world decision making and strategies that is not present, right? And that's an insight that we gained from COG, right? Mm-hmm. So in those Milsim experiences, it's not just like, okay, guys, we got the whole platoon here. We got to go in here and, destroy this base or whatever. It's how do we do this without losing anybody? How do we do this without losing a single person? And if we lose a single person, how do we get his body out of there? Not saying that this is going to be present in the game. This is just like where we glean these insights from. But you see how like once those become objectives, once the act of doing it with as few lives lost as possible, once you see that as a core directive or core drive of what you're trying to do, you can start seeing why certain IRL tactics and strategies are implemented. It's to do that with that objective in mind. So it's just aligning the player base with that. So whether it's having squads move up slowly together and mutually supporting, like, why do you do that? Well, so if this guy gets absolutely messed up and fucked up, you have another squad there to immediately assist, right? It's all this, all the real world tactics are at some level built around the whole idea of don't let anybody die as much as possible. And then still try to complete your objective. And so that's the core of the philosophy. I think if we can instill some of these pillars of the thinking into the game mode itself, players naturally enjoy metagaming. They will naturally do the best thing for the meta, but the key is how do you get the meta to mirror that of the real world? Right. That's the challenge. That's the task. Sorry, this was construction.
No, but here, let me loop it back to construction here, because it totally makes sense to me how reducing the value of the objective, reducing PTFO, it leads players to that, because an objective is a physical location. Once the objective is less important, what's more important, it's key terrain on the map. So then players will start, maybe doing a little bit more terrain analysis. They'll be occupying those important parts, and those important parts of the map, like a hilltop, are what you're going to want to fortify and construct stuff on.
Yeah, you never see players fight for key terrain in the current platoon shooters for the simple fact that the objective is more important. Mm-hmm. You might fight for some key terrain on the objective itself, but like a lot of these objectives, for the most part, they're generally like not that big. And the problem with having such a small area is that you end up having super weird metas start to form around the playing of that objective and building in the same spot every time, or whatever the case may be. There's like super weird gamey stuff that I don't like from that, rather than an organic sense of this is a new fresh AO, this is a new fresh map. Let's examine the map. Let's look at the key terrain. Let's determine, okay, we're going here, here, here. These are the key positions that we want to hold. And we're allowed to sit there and hold them. We're allowed to move off if we want. We have the freedom, the tactical freedom in order to do so, rather than in a lot, hell let loose squad that's currently out there right now. It's if you're not in the objective, you don't matter, guy, give up. Because that's just, when you play the game, once again, going back to the meta thing, right? Because I used to play squad because I wanted to win, right? And people wanted to win. That was the meta. And the meta in squad is super, super wonky. It is super strange. It has never really changed. Yeah, like if you think about this, right? If players play games to win, which most of the times they do, and we'll get to that because that's a super important. Let me write this down so I don't forget.
Okay.
Okay, so if you are playing a game to win, or if you're playing a game and you play a game to win, the game needs to work very well at the highest level when players are all attempting to win and min-maxing it, right? The problem is what you ended up seeing in squad or comp squad, or when you see comp squads play against pubs in squad, is the meta for winning squad is super. It's horrible. Or it used to be horrible. This is like maybe 2 years since I played squad, but the goal of squad is to actually not shoot or kill anyone. It's to capture flags.
Yes,
that's the goal of squad. The firefights actually are just a subsequential like coincidence to the game mode of squad. If you took a comp squad clan and you put them in a match and you told them to win this game as fast as humanly possible, what they would do is just rush all your back caps, sit and just outpace you and out-tempo you to the next flag. That would be the most efficient way for them to do things, right? Get there first, get there before you. We're on this flag, we cap this flag. We've already got another fob on your next flag. Everyone respawn, go over there, spawn on that objective, and then leapfrog and just avoid fights. The meta in squad is to actually avoid fights, which is super it's super weird, right? Super contradictory to the experience. You actually don't want to get into any gunfights. You just want to sit on flags and cap. And so, like, the gameplay experience is just super wonky. Just from all those years of playing squad, it's just like, there's so many pain points because of that design, because of how the game mode is set up. And that's one of the biggest pressures of pushing ourselves to try to create a new game mode that valued certain different things, was because seeing all these flaws and it's not just, I should say it's not just related to squad. I'm not just picking a squad. It's also Hell Let Loose. It's the same thing in Hell Let Loose, where it's like, everyone's pushing one objective. All right, we got it. Die, give up on the airhead, get to the next flag before they get here. Run, go. If you want to win a game, you're not looking for fights. You're not looking to kill and close with and destroy the enemy. You're not looking to outflank them or outmaneuver them in that sense in a gunfight. You're looking to bypass them, cut through, get past fast, own the objective, and then move on to the next one. The firefights just happen to happen when you are unable to do that. When the enemy is there and able to stop you and is in the way. But if they attempt to interdict you anywhere off the point, you're just like, what is this guy doing out here? We're just gonna give up and respawn on the closer fob. Like, sure, you can try to cut us off, but you can't create blocking positions in these games. You can't interdict people, to a meaningful degree, because every body that you have off the objective makes it so that you are actively a detriment to your team by not, impacting the point in play currently. And so it forces everyone in these meat grinders. I don't like it. I think 10 years into this experience, 20 years since that game mode from Battlefield has been like introduced, I think it's time for something new. I think it's time that we change it up, because the whole go into a circle, wait in the circle, die in the circle thing is just it. We're ready for the next thing. I think as a community, I think we're ready for the next game mode.
Yeah, and another thing is it turns the whole movement and maneuver side of things into teleportation, like you said, like give up, respawn. You're just like moving a whole squad of guys instantaneously to a more relevant part of the map, and it takes away from like the logistics of getting this force across the terrain to where they need to be, and it like removes the relevance of like ground lines of communication, supply lines, and the relevance of roads and avenues of approach. So I definitely see what you're saying there.
It takes away a lot of the replayability too, right? Because it's like, if I can see the points on the map, or I know the layout of the caps, I know where players are going to be, because I know of this incentive that players have of like, this is where I want to be, this is where I must be, because this thing is the thing. So like, you rip out a lot of replayability at the higher levels of gameplay, because a meta starts forming. Like, okay, they're gonna go up here because they can watch the cap point from this position every time. Like it's. I think there's definitely value for some players in those experiences, and I think what I should say is I don't necessarily think that is an incorrect way to like design a game, because there are benefits to that, right? The benefit is that for new players coming in, or players who are just coming in casually, like it's super simple. It's like we're walking in, we see everything, we're going there. I can just flip on, turn in, and go. That's the accessibility of that game mode. But for the people who are looking for like the teamwork, the leadership, the maneuvering, the coordination, right? A lot of that stuff you can only do at the highest levels nowadays. I think where it's like we're min maxing everything, and there's coordination in that, right? Like I think there's coordination in a
It is
number of
teamwork.
things you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is teamwork, but it's not like authentic. There's no more authentic teamwork, or like there's no room for that authenticity to
Mhm.
grow in that regard in that game anymore, just because that ceiling has been hit, and it is restricted by the game mode experience itself.
Yeah.
So open it up, create a more dynamic experience, create an experience where players have the freedom, and I think that tactical ability, that tactical flexibility becomes near limitless because players have their own incentives as a team to do things on a map where a game is not telling them explicitly get in this circle. So every time you go in, and that was the beauty behind dynamic direction to an extent, was that every time you load into a map, you looked at the map, you looked at where the circle was, you looked at the teams in play, you looked at where you started, and you're like, all right, how do we crack this nut? Right? How do we figure this out? And that kind of thinking is the kind of players that we want to draw. That's who this game is marketed for. It's for the people whose minds are geared toward that style of play, which is like the authentically looking at the situation before you and how can you implement your force to complete an objective without losing it.
Nice. All right. Great discussion on construction. um, let's go on to eWar.
Sure.
So I like the fact that you guys are including it at all is super unique, and honestly, I really like it. It's like a really important part of today's warfare IRL. And in that little roadmap image, you guys have more BTAC tools. I love the fact that you named it BTAC, by the way.
Yeah.
And drones slash UAS as like features under that little bucket. So are you able to give more concrete examples of how electronic warfare might actually manifest in the game?
Sure. So honestly, a lot of this is untreaded water, right? As you mentioned,
Mhm.
it's like unprecedented. It's going to be super delicate. So we're just going to go into it like super slow, super cautious as far as exploring that space. And this game is full of new ideas. Like there's a lot, almost every level of creating it, we've had new ideas on how to improve every single level. And like eWar is just another one of those that is new, but it's also it's accurate to the time period. It's the new thing. It's the hottest thing off the block in terms of warfare. And so figuring it out for a game, and figuring it out for the scale of game that we're looking at is definitely going to be tricky. It is going to be very light-handed at the beginning. Just the things you would expect. Certain drone operators will have drones equipped with them. They'll be able to deploy those drones and do some localized ISR for the element that they're attached to or with.
Mhm.
I totally see a world where we have some form of jamming into the game, but a lot of that is going to require testing. But essentially, eWar is the first step into that testing and exploration that we hope to expand into more features in the game. It's just something that we have to, feel out not only on our dev side, but also with the community and figure out, hey, does this seem overpowered in the games? Does this feel like it fits? Does it feel like we're getting way too into the weeds here with it? I think
Yeah.
there's a unique possibility there when it comes to eWar, but it's the first step is drones and drone countermeasures. The next after that is some form. I'm gonna disclaim this. This is completely experimental and completely
Sure.
like stuff that
Yeah.
we're just testing, but like being able to DF or see where people are transmitting from to help you find players on the map,
Mm.
and then the ability to potentially jam things other than drones. These are all things that we have to test and feel out and
Interesting.
explore, but they're all things that we are looking at doing because it adds depth to the experience. It changes how you fight. And of course, everything goes through testing before we push it out, and so nothing will come out wonky or overpowered as crazy, like game breaking as other things. So it's a lot of testing. It's a lot of prodding, and it is just in general. Like I say that as a game, but you can even see that only recently in the last couple of years. So people are testing that stuff. I don't know, like the meta is
Yeah.
starting to form right now. Like they're figuring out, like what can we do? What can we do with this thing? What can we do with eWar that and drones specifically that can truly change the battlefield. So we're paying attention. We're doing a lot of research, and we see how fast it's changing. In active areas. But yeah, we just got to shrink it down, get it to fit the game, make it sensible, make it balanced. But it's a whole new field to explore.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It sounds like in the latest dev blog you talked a lot about information and how that drives the pace of the game. It sounds like there is potential for this to feed into that component of how the game mode works.
Yeah.
All right. So next we got command. Okay, so I'm just gonna first I want to say I was super relieved to see command in the roadmap, because in the earlier devlogs I noticed that there were no command slots in the screenshots of the Team Orbat slots, and I was like, ooh, is this coming later? Is it just like a design choice? And then you guys put in the roadmap. I was like, okay, cool. All right, so we are gonna get command roles, and I assume that encompasses things like platoon leadership, enabler roles like JTACs, and then support call-ins, which I guess are going to be things like airstrikes. So are you able to kind of go into more detail about what types of roles you guys will be including? Is it, how true to life is it going to be? Like, will you guys have a platoon sergeant role, and are you going to have concrete gameplay mechanics tied to them?
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. So the platoon leadership role does entail everything from like the platoon leader, all the enablers you mentioned. As far as the platoon sergeant role, now that is a harder one to give an actual gameplay reason. Now there's ways to do it. We have to explore if we add it, though. That one is not as concrete. But like if you ask it, like this is how this will probably give you a snapshot into how we think of adding features. It's like platoon sergeant role is authentic. Platoons have this. How do we add this into the game in a way that makes sense and is not like just flair? But what is the platoon sergeant's role IRL, right? Well, he's doing a lot of leading in the field in fights, but he also does a lot of leading, out of the fight as well, right? Like he's a actual leader for when the element is in garrison or whatever, and it's important that that's an aspect of the game that is not present, right? There's no RP outside of the match where like this platoon sergeant is handling a whole myriad of tasks and responsibilities to the platoon. It's pretty much just in the fight. So there's ways you can do it where in COG, right? The reason why we have one in COG is because if the platoon leader goes down, you have someone that's there that is as competent to continue the fight and has an idea of the greater planning of things. So that's how I would approach that. It's like, what is the purpose? The purpose is to be there in the field, like in a firefight was the purpose. And the purpose is to lead the men, right? And to be an assistant to the platoon leader. Of course, that stuff only matters if the platoon leader can ever not be present at a time. So like one life operations, 1-7 is important, because if 1-6 goes down, he's not responding. Right. So 1-7 is aware of the greater plan. He can step up and do the task as needed. So that's one of the things in video games where it's like, it's hard to do. But once again, going back, if we limit the lives and we get to a point where, hey, the platoon leader, hey, he's gone. What's the plan? What's the deal? What are we doing? Then that role becomes somewhat relevant. So that's kind of how we look at things and think things out. And that's only like 30 seconds of taking a glance at the platoon leader stuff. But that's like the mentality of how we go through it. As far as what capabilities they all have, this also ties back into your question about your point about information and how information is important. This ties into leadership a lot. The fact that leaders have certain information is quite literally, to some degree, I would say, the reason why people follow leaders IRL in combat situations, right? Is they have more information, whether that information is A, experience, or B, information of adjacent units and supporting assets, right? Or the greater plan at hand. That is why leaders are useful in the field for the vast majority of things. Of course, they have a whole bunch of value that we're not discussing. That's not their only value for obvious reasons. But information is one of the primary, right? A lot of the times, leadership is the only one of the radios that are hooked into the greater platoon. They've been briefed to some degree on the plan at hand, and they understand the intricacies more so than a fresh rifleman or private in the squad. So those are the things that I think make leadership trusted and why you listen to them. In games, So if we go back to the platoon shooters in today's era, everyone has the same information, right?
A lot of information too.
Pretty much. Yeah, it's a lot of information, and everyone has the same information aside from platoon net, right? That is like the only net or the only little bit of information that ground players don't have. So what does this mean for gameplay? This means that if I have as much information as my leaders, why do I need the leader? Right? Why do I need, like, I can see the map, I can see where I'm supposed to go, I can see if I'm an experienced player, I can even see where the flank is in the enemy, where the gap is, and where I can go to exploit it. I don't need my leader anymore because I have all the capabilities for the most part, or all the information I need to go and do what I want to do. But if you shrink that down, right? If you look at games like Tarkov is a great example, or even well, maybe not a great example, but Tarkov, like, you need someone to lead the group, right? You need someone to lead the group to tell people where they're going. Otherwise, what happens because of the lack of information is, if anyone's worked in Tarkov teams or even in duos, you end up team killing each other, right?
Yeah.
It's if you don't have that information, then a lot of stuff becomes chaotic, and as a result of that chaos, you have extreme negative results occurring. So having leadership have information means that, okay, I don't know where my friendly elements are. Only my squad leader knows. I have a rough idea, like maybe, just because of how we've done the game, everyone has a rough idea of where everyone is. But if my squad leader has more information than me, just as a game mechanic or as a function of the game itself, I'm going to listen to him because he has stuff that I don't have, that I need in order to do my job, right? Or in order to do my thing, versus the current thing of everyone has everything, so just go wild, and just who cares about listening to your leaders and whatnot. So that's just one of the things we're doing in regards to making sure that leadership at all levels is important. It's just not making sure that they have cool assets and cool guns, because that's like super superficial, right? No one really, some people care, like, okay, this gun is obviously better than that one, but that we don't want that to be the reason that you take that role, right? Like, oh, this is the only role that has this weapon, that's why I'm taking it. No, you should be taking those roles with an understanding that there are certain responsibilities attached to that role, and that there are certain abilities outside of just the gun that you have that are tools that you can use to win. And information is just one of those tools. And information is just one of those tools that you don't see being utilized or really being leveraged in a lot of shooters, because that information is present. In regards to other roles, like forward observers or JTACs and whatnot, like they will have what you expect them to have. They'll have the same capabilities that you expect them to have. There's a little bit of figuring out how in depth we get with that, because that's one of the things. Like, this isn't like a role play experience. This isn't like, we don't want people.
Calling in
people can do whatever they want to a degree, right? Yeah, but like we don't want people to be LARPing in the middle of an active match, right? As much as as much as that stuff is cool and whatnot, like the gameplay experience is very specifically, I'm here to win, I'm here to kill, I'm here to achieve this goal with my squad. So sorry, we're gonna go off on a little tangent here.
Go for it, man.
So winning in competition. I've changed my mind on this back and forth throughout the years.
Okay.
I used to think winning in these games didn't matter. I used to think winning in these games was irrelevant to the experience of what was at hand, so long as you had a cool firefight. But as I grew and I started, I did the armor stuff and I started to understand certain things, like winning pushes players to do things to optimize their experience and to do the best that they can, right? Without winning, if winning has makes no difference, whether it's to their player state or account progression or whatever it is, if it has zero impact at all, then what you end up having is people just hop in the game and do whatever, right? There isn't like a driving experience that meshes the entire team together. So like you could look at games even like League of Legends, right? If you look at League of Legends, and if you said, hey, everyone, winning doesn't matter in this game, it would be utter chaos. It would be utter chaos. People would just do whatever they want to do, right? But because winning matters to a degree, you see players automatically fall into certain roles in order to, as a team, in order to win, right?
ADC, and that's jungle, top, mid,
yeah, exactly. So, and there's a general understanding, like the player might be experimenting with how to win, but if you can win and there's a core way to win and an optimized way to win, then players will naturally fall or learn those roles and fall into them. And you still have some. You're always going to have exceptions and people goofing off and whatnot, but like there's a much stronger glue there than if there was no incentive on winning. Then it's just chaos. Every man for himself to have their own fun kind of experience. So the goal for us is that's just a tangential goal is to make sure that winning matters to a degree that it can represent some of that glue. But yeah, leadership, information is important. They'll have the capabilities you expect, but not to the depth of like RPing or making you do really weird things just to do them.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So now let's circle back to vehicles, and I'm gonna kind of like categorize vehicles and launchers together. You can answer them separately or as part of the same system, however you want. But first, though, I'm curious how you plan to model vehicles and player interaction with them, because I did notice Bellum makes use of a lot of diegetic UI and a lot of in-universe interaction. So anything you have to say on that? For example, like vehicle interiors.
Mm-hmm. That's honestly just a resource and time consideration. We have not started working on vehicles yet at this exact moment. That is definitely going to be like a major project. It's going to be a major milestone. So like it's a little too far out to give you exact details on how they're coming out now. But what I can say is like, yeah, it's going to align with a lot of our core design philosophies that we've talked about previously already, which is like not that much UI, not that much information, right? So that's another thing, right? Is when you have a vehicle, right? You don't have like this magic. If you're sitting in an IRL vehicle, you don't have this magic meter telling you how much damage is on every part of the vehicle, right? You just, if something's wrong with the thing, you just got to like figure it out or feel it out. And without the UI, you have like, you can tell your gas, you can tell certain things. And like certain things that must be indicated, we will indicate. But we're a big fan over here of removing information from the player.
Yeah.
I think that just like reducing the lives, removing information from the player is something that lets these authentic tactics and experiences thrive. Because too much information, just like too many lives, leads to incredibly meta strategies and tactics. But if you don't know, then like you're gonna have to figure it out, right? You're gonna have to make the decision on the spot of what you do, and that's like the idea or the experience we want to cultivate.
All right, guys, that was part 1. Make sure to watch part 2 because it was just as good, if not better, and revealed even more about the upcoming game Bellum. The link will be in the description once it's up.